Hello friends, my name is Raj and this is my second class after introductory class. This is my second class on QTP. Today we are going to see how QTP works for record and play session. Again we will try to understand what are the features that we have in QTP and how we are going to utilize those features. So let's begin. First thing is, whenever you are starting with QTP, remember that you should open QTP application first, then the application which you are wanted to record or on which application you wanted to work. This is because when QTP is already launched, it will be ready to find out all the add-ins and all the other programmatical features which the application is being launched. If not so, it may happen that if you launch the application first and you launch QTP later, QTP may not be able to identify the objects of that application. It varies. Sometimes it will identify, but maximum times it will not identify. So first is, we are going to start with QTP. Here you can see QTP desktop icon. We'll double click on QTP. This icon will appear on your screen once you install QTP or UFT. QTP is the older version, whereas new version is named as UFT, Unified Functional Testing. But functionality wise, maximum is almost similar. You will find little differences, but maximum of the things are very much similar. So we will wait. Let's QTP launch. QTP has launched. Now see, this is the first page. So this page, they are giving some links and other things. This is just a welcome page. For recording and for other things, we have to come on test. Here new test is by default open, and it has keyword view and expert view. This is the file where you can go and save your newly created application. Save as or save all, and settings are again giving the settings of this QTP tool. We'll see settings once again. First we'll go to new. Here it is asking for you want to test or business component. Business component is used in BPT framework, where business process and test framework is required. In that case we use BPT. Scripted component is what, instead of writing functions in BPT framework, they write small components, and later on these components are combined together to form a business component or business flow. Application areas are the places where generally this is used for when it is linked with QC or ALM. ALM is a testing tool where which act as a repository between your it acts as a repository for your automation test cases, for your manual test cases, which helps you to launch application in test lab, and from test lab it will execute. So this is just a test management tool in which you keep your library functions. The functions you are seeing, you can keep in different places also, but generally this is used when it is linked with QTP. So what happens, the moment you clicked on this icon, quality center connection, it will connect with QC, and whatever the files and path is you will mention here, it will load the file, object repository, other things to run. So what is the advantage in this case? The file and the other systems need not to be on the same system. It is shared repository. Second thing, you can log into almost any system. You just need UFT and call those functions. If it is connected to the same QC environment, it will automatically load those functions. So you don't need to dependent, and multiple people can share the same libraries and functions. So that same function can be shared between multiple people. This icon is for record. This is for run. If there is some test cases, then it will run. This is for stop. and this is for repository. If you have object repository, if you click on this icon, it will help you to open a new repository. This is QTP tool demo. We are saying what are the options that we are having. See, object repository, all objects. So in this case, you can just open another object that is present in this. Nothing is there as of now. So if you want, you can open another object repository, and object repository will be available here. So for the people who are seeing this for the first time, they are feeling like lot of jargon of object repository, test management, testing tool, other things. Please be in sync. We will slowly discuss and unfold everything in the coming classes. This is just to give you a brief view about QTP. So these are the icons. Among them, the most and very important is one is this object spy. What does a spy do? It gives you a internal information of some organization or some person, something. Similarly, the same name has been given to object spy. It will spy an object and will give you the internal description. For example, now it's time for us. See, QTP is already launched. Now we are going to launch our application, flight reservation application. So let's say agent is Rasen and password is. So our Mercury flight reservation application. This application comes with QTP. QTP gives you this application for your practice purpose, so that you can identify or work on multiple things. Now suppose you wanted to know the field details of date file. So this application is basically a simulation of booking a flight ticket between two locations. Now see, so this is our application, and what we did, we went to name. So this is a field where people will enter the name, flight to flight from flight to, and then you can enter your name. So for example, say, okay, we have entered the name. Now we'll search for the flight. So these are the flight that is appeared between Denver and Frankfurt on this date. So a person can book any flight. Sorry, this one. Okay. Okay, so we are going to see. So this field name, what are the properties of this? So see, spy is saying it is a window kind of application. So a window, and the page name is flight reservation. Inside flight reservation we have win edit. So in this case we have, it is window edit box, that is, it is a edit box, and edit box name is name. Other than name, we have many other features or properties like x-axis, y-axis, length. Attached text is name. Enable is true, that is enable for writing, but if you see for different, I'll show you the disable ones also. Then native class is edit, object class edit. So this is an edit box. In case of web application, it will be web edit. In case of SAP application, it will be SAP edit. In case of Windows application, it is win edit. Now we'll see one where fly it is not enabled. Let's see, it is a departure time, and attached text is departure time, and visible is true. Enable, one second. Enable is false. Do you remember last time enable was true? That means you can enter a text, but this time enable is false. That means you cannot enter a text in this edit box, though it is edit box, but is not available for editing purpose. Okay, so we will basically go ahead with our basic introduction first. So this is work of a object spy. We were showing, if you click on this and click on this, you spy anything on the screen, it will give you what is the property and object of this application. But if you want to navigate it someplace, remember, press Control, press this button, press Control, you are free to click anything, it will not highlight. But if you leave it, see, it is here, it's not identifying. If you leave it, then immediately it will start identifying. So stop making it identify anything which you don't require, and identify something which you wanted to. Just a second. Identify something which you wanted to require. Remember, you need to press on Control button. Control. Now see, it is not identifying anything. When you release the button, Control button, so I am going to release my Control button, so I released it. Now it is identifying. Okay, now so we have to think first, how does QTP identifies an object in the application? That's the first question. Please write it down. If I forget to mention these things again, remember and ask me, how QTP, is it a kind of magic or is it something else that QTP identifies an object present in all the applications? Number one. Number two, okay, let's begin with number one itself. If you go to these files, and then go to settings, then just a second, so we will come to this property sections and we will go to, hello friends, so we have seen that we have to go to tools, then inside tools, object identification. What is the properties for object identification? So in this case we can see different environment, like standard Windows environment, we can have so many types of objects. What are that? Win button is nothing but it's a button in the browser. Win calendar, it's a calendar in the browser. Win checkbox, it's a checkbox. And win combo, sorry, these are the Windows button, Windows calendar, Windows checkbox and combo box, and these are all Windows properties. Mainly and largely we will use till this point Windows table, Windows toolbar. If you can see here, this is called mandatory properties, this is assistive properties, there is something called smart identification, and this is ordinal identification. So from here we can conclude that there are 4 types of properties based on which QTP will identify an object. So first is mandatory property. Taking the help of mandatory property, whenever you, just a second, we'll close this for a while, we'll check this. Now these are the properties, these are the available properties that object spy says that this is the property of the object, this is the property. See, attach text is a property. What is the value of this property? Is name. Focus is true, enable is true. So what is the property? Enable is the property and the value is true. Now if we select for some other one second, this departure time, if we select departure time, then attached text is the property. So remember, the property remains the same but the value is different. So similarly, property of this enable is same, enabled, but value is different. Last time it was true, now this is false. So the for each object there will be a multiple types of properties. But how do QTP identify the object? It will identify the object with the help of these 4 types of properties. First is mandatory property. So in this case, mandatory property is attached text and native class for WinEdit. So it will try to identify a text box in the Windows application using these 2 properties. What is the properties? Attached text and native class. For example, if attached text and native class is not unique, native class means it is WinEdit. WinEdit is the native class. Attached text is name. Now suppose there are multiple fields with the same name, then it will take the help of SST property. If it can identify using mandatory property, QTP will identify using mandatory property. If you find multiple objects, it will find duplicate objects with the same property, it will go to the SST property, it will ask for the assistance. So SST property, it will combine mandatory plus SST property to find out a unique value. In case if SST property is also not unique, sometimes we have to mention for ordinal identifiers. What are ordinal identifiers? These are index and location, as you can see in your application. So what does it do? Based on the index, it will, if similar objects are available, it will mark them as an index, like edit box 1, edit box 2 sorry, edit box 3. So using this index property, still all the mandatory property, SST property and ordinal identifier, it will combine all these 3 properties to find out a unique object. What is smart identifier? Generally we don't prefer smart identifier. Reason behind is, it says that mandatory property plus SST property plus smart identifier. Smart identifier says it will search for value 1. If value 1 is found, then it will click on value 1. If it does not found, then it will go to value 2. If value 2 property is found, it will highlight or identify that property, else it will discard the value 1 it discarded. Now it will discard the value 2 also. It will search with the value 3. Again it will discard 3, it will identify value 4. So in this case there is a probability that it will identify the wrong property. So instead of making it pass or clicking on the right object, it will click on something in the wrong object. That is why maximum cases we will try to avoid smart identifier. Now where do we use smart identifier? In some cases in the portal pages, when the table is not unique or the portal page is made up of multiple tables. Basically this happens in case of SAP tables. When application is built on SAP technology, it's not a web application, it's open as a browser, but this is a SAP page. So all the objects will be identified not as a web button, web edit. It will identify as SAP button, SAP edit. So in that case table will also be identified as the SAP table. In that cases multiple tables are there, we generally use smart identifier to identify the table, so that if the property is very dynamic and very limited number of property values are given, that too there is no unique value at all, in that case we will use to identify the table. Remember, not the value, it's the table identification done using smart identification. I will request you people to please remember and write down this path. Go to tools, object identification, In case of object, you have to select for the application. See, it is web application, it's different. Web application, page, link, web area, web edit. So that was WinEdit. Now this is web edit. See, mandatory properties are HTML, name and type, and smart identification already clicked. We will disable this smart identification. Ordinal identifier is already selected as index, so it will try to find out with the help of this mandatory properties. If not, then it will go for the index. If you want to add some SST property, you can very well go ahead and add an SST property like HTML, inner HTML or HTML text, and you can add, remove, you can add and remove mandatory properties, you can add and remove SST properties, but basically this will be done during the SAP implementation. Rarely we will add this mandatory and SST property. Reason being, if this configuration is modified in your machine, in your local machine, then you have to modify this configurations in all of the machines. Otherwise your machine will identify, or that machine may not be able to identify. We'll see. Let's see. This is mandatory property, this is SST property, ordinal identifier and smart identifier. I believe I am pretty much clear with this, right? Anybody having any question, please go ahead and ask me. Okay, then I will carry on. Cancel. So far we have understood that there are certain group of properties using which, so suppose an object having 20 properties, QTP will not identify all the 20 properties, will not use all the 20 properties to identify that object. To identify that object, QTP will use these given properties like mandatory properties. It will identify the set of minimum set of mandatory properties. If you mention too many things in the mandatory properties, and suppose you checked for HTML ID or tag name or something else, now if this object HTML ID is random, it is changing every time you launching the application, so what happens, it will, suppose you mention 3 properties, so 2 properties remains unique and third property is varying, your object will fail, because QTP will think that I have to find out property A plus property B plus property C. If A, B, C all 3 is not present in the application, it will give error that this object does not exist in the current application. Okay, so for that reason we try to give minimum of properties. Again, the disadvantage is if you give too less properties, every time you will get the same error like this, we have multiple objects with the same name. So it's very important to maintain an optimal kind of object environment. See, there is an interview question that what does an object spy do, and people generally answers object spy identifies the object, which is a wrong answer. Object spy helps the tester to identify the properties of the object. Again, which property a tester or a developer will use to identify the object, that depends on the person itself. Whatever he finds unique, whether he wanted to use index, whether he wanted to use object smart identification, or he wanted to use SST property, this everything depend on the person, how experienced he is, and with the minimum object, using minimum objects, how he can identify the object properties. Now we will have one more thing. See, for example, we'll go back again to the tools, object spy, sorry, tools, object identification. And now we have to understand here one very important point. It's actually very important point, I believe. Everybody who started his career in automation for the first time, they have to understand one thing, and this is the core of the QTP automation or any kind of automation, whether it is a QTP or Selenium or any other thing you are going to work on. Remember one thing, application does not matter in case of automation. Your objective is to identify maximum 8 to 10 types of object on the web page, on the Windows application, on the SAP application. See, Windows application is separate. This is built on Windows technology. SAP application is separate. SAP ECC will be separate. SAP portal will also be separate. Those are built on ABAP technology. Your browser is separate. Browser is basically HTML technology built on Java and .NET. Now, so for identifying or for having object identification, you need different types of objects to be identified. That is the work of QTP. But if you think nicely, what we do in all the kind of applications, we do only two things. Either we retrieve some information from the application, or we input some data to save it and get some value. Done. Now, so all the application in the world are having 7 to 8 kind of objects. You need to learn to deal with these 8 to 10 types of object. That's it. You are done with your automation 50%. So what are those objects? Objects are web button. So this is a browser page. Environment here is browser. See, environment is web. Web means web technologies based on Java, based on .NET. So they identify button as a web button, checkbox as a web checkbox, edit box as a web edit, web element as a web element, element as a web element, file as a web file, list as a web list, radio button as a web radio group. See, everything is already given here, and they have done that. In case of mandatory property, it is going to find out with the help of this. Smart identification is already selected. So we have to, in our automation class, we have to focus on dealing with all these 8 to 10 kind of objects. Once you learn how to deal with 8 to 10 types of objects, it will be really easy for you people to proceed and go with the next classes, next level of automation. So first is to identify the object. Once you identify the object, then only you can do something with that object. And trust me, identifying object is one of the most difficult tasks in automation. Coding anyways you will be knowing. So I'll tell you there are 3 types of automation process. I'll tell you about the 3 types of automation later on. But now we are dealing with 3 to 4 different kind of applications. One is Windows application, second is web browsers, third is SAP ECC application, and fourth is SAP browsers. So these are the 4 things, but everywhere you will be dealing with edit box, button, checkbox, radio button, combo box, list box, and few other items. Based on that technology, sometimes it differs, link and frame, image, etc. So please be consistent and follow that, how we are dealing with each application, each types of objects. Now coming to the types of automation. So basically there are 3 types of automation. three types of automation. One is, what is that first one? First one which we use in the industry is object repository, OR based. Object repository based. Mainly in case of browser we uses object repository based. If your suite is big, like SAP has a lot of flows and applications, if the suite size is big, we will try to not use OR, because if we use too much of OR based application, this OR will mount on the memory, and OR size is big, so it will make the system execution slow. To overcome this OR based issue, people went for descriptive programming. Now in case of descriptive programming, again people moved one step ahead to make it quantized, to make more like a function rather than just a coding based thing. They went for dynamic descriptive programming. So now our target in next classes will be to start with object repository based automation, then go to descriptive programming based automation, then go to dynamic descriptive programming. So these are the three types or three approaches, better we can say. We'll write it, approach. Three approach of automation. And here we do not have anything called correct way of automation. All these three are industry accepted and widely used way of automation. Now what are the different types of technologies that we are going to automate? Number one is browser based on Java or .NET. Second one is Windows application. Third one is SAP application, SAP ECC application. Fourth one is SAP portals. These are browsers based on SAP technologies. Okay, and as you are seeing, if you press, you can now learn how these are the comments. If you run this, QTP treat these green lines like the inverted comma, and then whatever you write will be treated as comment. These are not codes, so it will not execute during execution. Now what are the different types of fields? Mainly there are, as I said earlier, so please write down all these types of let me write it down. We are going to deal with button, then edit box, then text box, sorry, it's not edit box, okay, edit box, and then list box, combo box, radio button, and checkbox, text area. Text area are the big check boxes. Okay, and anything else? Button, edit box, list box, combo box, radio button, radio checkbox, and other few types are there. So we'll keep it in our, we'll save it in some. Okay, we'll save it later. First we are going to see this. Let it be. Okay, so let's begin. I'm just going to split this session. So with this session we have almost completed the basic introduction of QTP and what are the objects. Okay, one more thing is left behind is this settings. File, go to settings. These are the properties of the QTP. Run. So in one iteration, how many times you want it to run? If you select only one iteration, QTP will run the same piece of code once and then it will stop. If you select for row number, it wanted 1 to 10. So if 10 iterations are present or 12 iterations are present, QTP will run only 10 iteration. It will not go for 11th iteration. Run on all rows. It means if 10 or 20 iterations are present, QTP has to run on 20 iterations. Object synchronization timeout is 20 seconds. What does that means? It means QTP will try to find out an object till 20 seconds before throwing an error that object does not exist. If it does not find out the object in 20 seconds, if it find out before that, it will definitely move ahead. If it did not find out before 20 seconds, then it will throw an error. When error occurred, what to do? Pop-up message box should be displayed. Proceed to the next action iteration. Stop run. Proceed to the next step. Next iteration is, suppose 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. So next iteration says that if there is some issue with the object identification, it will go and select for second iteration where 2 plus 2 is 4. So it will go for, but suppose if 1 plus 2 equal to 3, so in case of reading 1 itself is find out an issue, then it will go to identify 2. It will not go to the next iteration. It will go to identify next step. That is the difference between these two things. So you can configure these settings based on your requirement. These are the resources. Resources are used for object repository purpose. So if you select this, associate a functional library, as you can see, so you have written your functions. We will see in the coming classes. Suppose for identifying one object, for identifying one edit box, for identifying some button, you have already written a function. In that case, you will keep your function in some repository and you will map that repository here. So during runtime, it will load that repository. See, so where you have C program quick test professional file, if you want to create, you can create another file and you can load that program. Okay, parameters. Here if you are writing a function and you wanted to pass two parameters, suppose add two number, then first number, second number, and the output will be the sum. So in case of if you have written a function, you need to pass. Those who knows the C or any other programming language, they know when you write a function, add two numbers, then there should be two number input should be given to the sum. So that parameter, that input in programming language are called parameters. So that parameter, first number and second number that need to be added should be passed. So how do function will take the parameter? You have to define your parameter here. See, this parameter is string type. You have to give the parameter name, default value, description, and you can similarly add the input parameter. So what will be the input parameter? Number 1. Again the input parameter will be number 2, and then the output parameter will be sum. This is useful when we are dealing with functions, that we will take care in the next class. These are environment on which the system is running, operating system, OS version and all. For browser navigation, see, navigation time by default is 60 seconds. Since the browser loading time is different, so it will wait for more time for the browser to get fully launched. If the browser is not launched properly, object may not be available on the browser and application will throw an error that this button or this edit box is not present. The process of waiting for some time for an object or for action to perform, we call them synchronization, syncing with the application, syncing with the objects. So if browser itself is not launched, say for browser is slow, application is maybe down, or it takes generally some time for the browser to appear, in that case there should be a process that QTP should wait. So by default QTP will wait for 60 seconds. If browser is not appearing within 60 seconds, it will fail. In that case you have to mention in your program that for this particular browser wait for certain more time, and you can define your time whatever you like. Those things we will see during the coding process. Recovery scenarios. These are recovery scenarios where you have to mention what to do when your application crashes, when your application is throwing an error, how to gracefully handle those errors and make your application go ahead. See, maximum people believes that if you automate something, it will go like a train. It will be simply smoothly going forward, there will not be any issue. Whereas in real time application, when you are dealing with, as you have seen also in case of SAP, in SAP when you are giving data, there can be warning messages, there can be error messages, there can be a prompt message. In case of web browser also there can be a pop-up, there can be a warning. So how this warning was not there when the automation was done, but now application UI or the business logic is changed. So how does your program is robust, how it is robust to overcome these issues and resolve them and move ahead. Those things you can predict and you can mention in your recovery scenarios, and then add the recovery scenarios like your function libraries. That we will see later. So these are the test settings. Before proceeding further, I thought like you may like to know these things. So what we have learned in today's class, we have learned how does the QTP identifies an object. First is object spy displays all the properties required. Now we'll see once again, object spy is going to spy one text box. Now it displays the properties, name, other things, XY coordinates, everything, and it will sometime also suggest what are the operations that you can perform on this. But generally we don't need this set of see, set text, set secure, So all these kind of operations are possible in this text box. Come back to the properties. So this is the generic properties that we use. This is identification properties. Remember, you have something called native properties. Native properties is hidden for Windows application. Let me open a browser page. Reason being, native properties are the properties that developer uses to identify the object. So you do have an option to modify the properties identify and native properties to identify the object during runtime. So we have learned object identification. QTP does not uses all the objects identified properties. Instead it uses 2 to 3 to 4 maximum combination of objects that QTP identifies. Second thing, how does it select that properties, which 2-3 set of properties to be used to identify a type of object? That is done in the object mapping, where we have seen there are 4 types of object: standard object identification, SST property, then ordinal identifier, then what, smart identification. So there are 4 types of properties that is used to find out the object. Now third thing we have learned, which was very important, is what are the different types of what are the different types of objects that is available. There are only 8 to 10 types of object per technology. So in case of wave, if you know how to deal with 8 to 10 type of objects, in case of SAP you know how to deal with this 8 to 10 types of object, then your 80% automation work is done. Remember what I said, it's 80% of your automation work is done just by identifying and knowing how to deal with this object. Not only that, in future if some different types of application or technology is coming, remember that these 8 to 10 types of object you have to identify in that technology and your work is done. So this class was very vital as part of automation basics, because if you understand these 3-4 things and die hard it's very important that you understand this and remember this while identifying or while doing automation. This is the basic requirement, this is the basic understanding which is required for automation engineers. Now there is one more thing which I wanted to cover in this class, and that is what is the quality of a good automation engineer. Quality of a good automation engineer depends on how effectively he can identify an object, handle the object in the object repository, maintain share repository, writing reusable descriptive programming, error handling, debugging and finding the cause of the error. Now in this case, writing reusable programs is very important. Now since we know that we are going to deal with only this 8 to 10 types of objects, so we have to write function to identify only this 8 to 10 types of objects. That's it. If you write the function, you just call the function, pass the value, and the function will take care of it. So I'm going to repeat once again why understanding this concept was very important. Write a very nice clean programs or functions. Okay, now this function has to be tested multiple times. Once this piece of code is working fine, just call this piece of code each and every time. So point of making the mistakes, or point of getting the code failed, is very minimal. It's very rare. If you identify the object nicely, if your codes are pre-written, 99% cases are there where your QTP automation will not fail. You can close your eyes, call those functions will do their task nicely. What if even that is failing? It will fail only because object is not identified properly. That's it. You have to go modify the object, and once the object is identified, again call those functions. For example, a text box is there, so SAP edit or Win edit or Wave edit is just an edit box. So whatever edit box comes, you simply call that function, give them the browser name, page name, and that edit box name with the some properties, and call that function. That function is already pre-configured and nicely written. It will give you proper report and it will do its task. You don't have to take headache every day. It's a one-time activity, and this is how in real life project people will work. They will not write code for each and everything. They will just create the code for this 8 to 10 properties, keep it in the library, and whenever that edit box, click button, something is required, simply call those properties, and that property will help you out. In the coming classes, we will see and we will try at least 2 to 3 such properties where these properties will identify and help us. We will just call this property, these functions, and we will pass the properties, and we will see how does it works. With this event, I am going to close today's section of basics of SAP automation. Today's class was bit theoretical, I understand, but this theory is the backbone of all automation. If you understand this thing, at least from QTP point of view, I can assure you, you will not face much challenges. Now this is the first inception stage. Second stage is how to identify object properties, how to write a function, and how to use them in our day-to-day programming language. That we are going to see in the coming classes. Thank you.